To order, let me share a couple of thoughts with you. 22 years ago, I became the chairman of this committee, and I haven't since that time. That's because under the rules of the Republican side, if you chair a ranking member in another committee, you can't chair a subcommittee. And this is really the committee where really everything is happening. The problems that we're facing today are the ones that we deal with. So Tim and I are going to do a good job of that, and Joni and the rest of the committee. The committee meets for the first time in the new session of Congress to receive testimony from you guys, and you're used to this from after yesterday. And I don't think there's a member of this committee who hasn't read what happened yesterday. I know I have. We're joined by the same group. We have all the vices here, General Allyn, Admiral Moran, General Walters, and General Wilson. So I appreciate your sticking to this one more time here. Last week, General Mattis used the guidance on the administration's plan to rebuild and strengthen our armed forces. But you know, I looked at some of the things that were said yesterday, some of the quotes, and I really do appreciate the fact that you folks came out and said things that weren't easy to say. We had General Allyn talking about the Army. Only 3 of 58 brigade combat teams are ready to fight. We had General Wilson talked about how many of the hollow force actually used the term hollow force, and that's what we're faced with right now. A lot of the characteristics that we who are old enough to remember it, remember from the Carter administration, the Carter administration, know what we had to do the following years. And so that's very similar to what we're going to have to do now. We had General Walters. You talked about the operational tempo is as high as it was during the peak of the Iraq and Afghanistan war. We know the problems that are out there. And when I tell people, while I didn't always get along perfectly with Hagel when he was in the Senate, and I wasn't one of his strongest supporters when he came into this being the Secretary of Defense, when I read the statements that he has made from that position, it's a wake-up call to the American people who otherwise they don't know. They're not exposed to this. This is when he said, quote, "America dominance on the seas, in the skies, and in space can no longer be taken for granted." So this is something that is we want to address, we want to accept as a reality, and so we're going to have to improve our readiness, achieve balance in addressing shortfalls, and build a larger and more capable and more lethal joint force. Those were the statements that were made, the 3 priorities that were given to this committee, the major committee, just a week or so ago. So we have a lot of these problems that we're going to be dealing with. During Secretary Mattis's nomination hearing, he stated that we were going to have to increase operation and maintenance funding and while adapting to strengthening our military as the situation dictates. This means additional resources are needed. And what I'd like from our witnesses today is an outline of how you plan to restore the readiness to our armed forces and how we regrow our force, how do we maintain the equipment that has been through 2 decades of war, and how do we train that force to meet the national security requirements. So this is the committee where most of the action is going to be, and we've got a lot of work to do. And Tim and I have already talked about this, and we're going to see to it that we start getting a bigger attendance here and that we start addressing these problems that we should be addressing before they hit the major committee. Senator Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You've done a better job arm twisting on your side of the table than I have.
Yeah, well, I guess so.
So I have to up my game here, but welcome to the witnesses. This is an interesting hearing. The witnesses, did you know this, Mr. Chair? Our 4 witnesses have a combined 142 years of combined military experience, and so that means I know we're only going to hear the most astute wisdom today. There is a limit to what we can discuss in open session, so I just say at the start that all colleagues on the committee are encouraged to read the classified readiness reporting that is available to members of this subcommittee. I am pleased to be the ranking. I work very, very well with the chairman. We've got a good relationship, and I know this subcommittee will continue the bipartisan tradition that is its norm. The military does suffer from an unacceptable level of readiness. I said to the chair as we walked in, some of what we'll hear today, we heard last year, and we heard 2 years ago. You know, somebody said, maybe if we listened, history wouldn't have to repeat itself. The first step we ought to take to address this vulnerability is to provide more predictable and stable funding for men and women in uniform. The new administration has made some comments about spending that I agree with, the desire to boost military spending and repeal sequestration for the DoD. But we haven't heard the same commitment with respect to repealing sequestration for the whole government. The chairman of this committee, Chairman McCain, put out a report suggesting that should be done. And even if your focus is specifically on national security, it's still very important that sequestration, we look at it not just on the DoD accounts, but on whole of government. Because whether we're talking about Homeland Security, state, the DEA, the nuclear reactor portion of what the Department of Energy does, there's so many things in the non-defense discretionary side that really are integral to our security challenges. We've got the responsibility to help DoD restore readiness as soon as possible. We'll be getting good information that we can use as information to persuade our colleagues of this. I am concerned about one recent development, the hiring freeze that was issued on January 23rd for federal civilian employees. It was not a permanent hiring freeze. It was a temporary hiring freeze to analyze what should be done, and I hope it is, in fact, temporary, because this does have a readiness impact on shipyards, depots, air logistics centers, but also on other federal agencies, because the federal agency is sort of the employer of choice for veterans. So when you do a hiring freeze at the federal level, it falls most disproportionately on the veterans that are hired so significantly into the federal government. At a time when we're losing shipyard, depot workers, and others to retirement and sequestration-related attrition, I'm afraid that a freeze like this, if it continues, could really hurt us both on the readiness side and be unfair to our veterans. I am pleased in hearing from our witnesses today about plans to rebuild readiness and what exactly does a fully funded ready force looks like. Each service branch has its own measures of readiness, and some of the most interesting discussions we've had in these hearings in the past is exactly what is a readiness measure mean. I used to say as governor, I could measure everything, but the one thing that scared me was measures of emergency readiness. I could measure an unemployment rate, I could measure a graduation rate, but what was the measure for what we would do if there was a hurricane tomorrow? Those measures are tough, and the need for the committee to understand exactly how we measure the readiness in the different branches is very important. I understand the hearing today from the Air Forces, they would like to increase the number of fighter squadrons from 55 to 60. So what are the resource requirements we have to grapple with in the committee and those who are on budget and appropriations to get to that, and what's the appropriate time frame that we should be looking at to make that kind of advance? This committee also deals with MILCON and facility sustainment, and these are important matters to readiness too. When we talk about increasing military spending, I do think that there is this area where we can do better, and that's increasing the O&M funding for facilities sustainment, restoration, and modernization. We'll be getting into some testimony that I'm really interested in on the shipbuilding side, but as a general matter, if we're resource pressed and we end up having sort of fewer facilities, then it becomes even more important if we have fewer that those that we have we maintain to a higher level. That's not necessarily what we're doing now in the MILCON area or in purchasing platforms. Our installations have for a long time had to defer necessary maintenance, and if we don't address backlogs soon, it just leads to higher long-term costs and risks that decrease the quality of life for our troops. So I hope we can look at the FSRM counts, increase as much as possible in the FY18 NDAA. I hope we can increase military construction across the active and reserve components. If we can increase those two accounts in particular, we'd not only improve the readiness and installations in every state, it would also bolster the resiliency of facilities, and we need to work together to make this happen. One area that's important to me, and I know important to the chair, and we have some slight differences on it, but that's some areas of agreements too, is the area of energy. DoD is the largest user of energy in the federal government, and I support the military's effort to invest in technologies and alternative sources that not only improve readiness, but increase combat capabilities by extending range, endurance, lethality, and energy resilience for our installations, and especially in some ways for forward operating bases. Whether DoD is confronting cyber threats or vulnerabilities in its energy supply or protecting against severe weather events, from a readiness perspective, we've got to make sure that we make investments in energy resiliency. And we did those in Section 2805 in the 2017 NDAA, and I hope we will continue to do that. So, Mr. Chair, thanks again for today's hearing. To start this discussion that will roll up into the NDAA work that we will do as a full committee, I'm excited to work with you as the ranking on this committee, and very gratified that we have the witnesses here today.
Well, thank you, Senator Kane. Now, it'll be easy for you guys, because you can use the same opening statements that you used yesterday if you want to. But we want to hear it, and we want to get it on record. Some of the things, very bold statements that were made, it's worth repeating, because this is for our record over here. If we're going to be very aggressive, trying to make the changes necessary to bring our defenses up. So feel free to do it. We'll start with you, General Allyn. Try to keep them down somewhere around 5 minutes. All right?
Thank you, Chairman Inhofe, Ranking Member Kane, distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the readiness of your United States Army. I appreciate your support and demonstrated commitment to our soldiers, civilians, families, and our veterans, and look forward to discussing the strength of our Army with you today. This is a challenging time for our nation and certainly for our Army. The unipolar moment is over, and replacing it is a multipolar world characterized by competition and uncertainty. Today, the Army is globally engaged with more than 182,000 soldiers supporting combatant commanders in over 140 worldwide locations. My recent travel, I visited our soldiers in 15 countries since Veterans Day, reinforces that the Army is not about programs. It is about people, our people executing security missions all around the globe. The strength of the all-volunteer force truly remains our soldiers. These young men and women are trained, ready, and inspired. And we must be similarly inspired to provide for them commensurate with their extraordinary service and sacrifice. To meet the demands of today's unstable global environment and maintain the trust placed in us by the American people, our Army requires sustained, long-term, and predictable funding. Absent additional legislation, the caps set by the Budget Control Act of 2011 will return in FY18. That would be October of this year, forcing the Army to once again draw down end strength, reduce funding for readiness, and increase the risk of sending undertrained and poorly equipped soldiers into harm's way, a preventable risk our nation can and must prevent. We thank all of you for recognizing that plans to reduce the Army to 980,000 soldiers would threaten our national security, and we appreciate all your work to stem the drawdown. Nevertheless, the most important actions you can take, steps that will have both positive and lasting impact, will be to immediately repeal the 2011 Budget Control Act and ensure sufficient funding to train, man, and equip the FY17 NDAA authorized force. Unless this is done, additional top-line and OCO funding, though nice in the short term, will prove unsustainable, rendering all your hard work for naught. In this uncertain environment, readiness remains our #1 priority. Sufficient and consistent funding is essential to build and sustain current readiness, progress towards a more modern, capable force sized to reduce risk for contingencies, and to recruit and retain the best talent within our ranks. Readiness remains paramount because the Army does not have the luxury of taking a day off. We must stand ready at a moment's notice to defend the United States and its interests. With your assistance, the Army will continue to resource the best trained, best equipped, and best led fighting force in the world. We thank you for your steadfast support of our outstanding men and women. Please accept my written testimony for the record, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. All statements will be made a part of the record. Good statement. Admiral Moran.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to you and the members of the subcommittee. It's a real privilege to be here with my fellow vice chiefs to talk about the readiness of our military. The crux of my testimony is that your Navy is less ready because she is simply too small. It's a simple matter of supply can't meet demand. The smallest Navy we've had in 99 years can only answer 40% of combatant commander requirements today. On 9/11, we had 316 ships and over 400,000 sailors. Today, we have 275 ships and nearly 90,000 fewer sailors. And yet the world has become a lot busier place today. A smaller fleet operating at the same pace is wearing out faster. Work has increased, and we're asking an awful lot of our sailors and Navy civilians. That said, we are where we are, which makes it urgent to pass an amended budget and remove sequestration so that we can adequately fund, fix, and maintain the fleet that we do have. It seems that every year, to Senator Kane's point, we come before you and talk about making tough choices. And more often than not, we rightly choose to support those forward at the expense of those at home. This year is more of the same, and our long-term readiness continues its insidious decline. So while we're still able to put our first team on the field, our bench is largely depleted. With your help, we have the opportunity to change all this. It starts by strengthening the foundation of the Navy by ensuring that the ships, aircraft, and submarines that we do have are maintained and modernized so they provide the full measure of their combat power. Then, let's lift the holes and fill the holes, by eliminating the inventory shortfalls of ships, submarines, and aircraft in the fleet. Together, by taking these two steps, we can achieve the ultimate goal of sizing the Navy to meet the strategic demands of this dynamic and changing world. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Admiral. Excellent statement. General Walters.
Good afternoon, sir. Chairman Inhofe, Ranking Member Kane, and distinguished members of the Armed Services Subcommittee on Readiness. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today and report on the readiness of your Marine Corps. The Marine Corps remains dedicated to our essential role as our nation's naval expeditionary force in readiness. During 15 years of conflict, we focused investment on ensuring our Marines were prepared for the fight, and they were. Today, our operational tempo remains as high as it was during the peak of operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. Our continued focus on deployed unit readiness combined with fiscal uncertainty and funding reductions will leave your Marine Corps facing substantial readiness challenges. Your Marine Corps is insufficiently manned, trained, and equipped across the depth of the force to operate in an evolving operational environment. Due to your years of fiscal constraints, the Marine Corps is fundamentally optimized for the past and has sacrificed modernization and infrastructure to sustain our current readiness. In addition to the increased resources for operations and maintenance needed to improve current readiness across the entirety of your Marine Corps, we require your support in 3 key areas to regain the readiness levels our nation requires of us. Over the past 18 months, we have identified various end strengths and associated capabilities and modernization required to operate in the threat environment characterized by complex terrain, information warfare, electromagnetic signatures, and a contested maritime environment. We need to increase our active component end strength. We are confident that an increase of 3,000 Marines per year maintains a rate of growth consistent with effective recruiting and accession while maintaining our high standards. Our bases, stations, and installations are the platforms where we train and generate our readiness. The continued underfunding of facility sustainment, restoration, modernization, and military construction continues to cause progressive degradation of our infrastructure and creates increased long-term costs. We have a backlog of $9 billion in deferred infrastructure sustainment requirements. We require up-to-date training systems, ranges, and facilities to support the fielding of our new equipment and simulation systems that facilitate improved training, standards, and readiness. Supporting the joint force requirements over the past 15 years consumed much of the life of our legacy systems, while fiscal uncertainty and reduced defense spending forced significant delays on our modernization efforts. There is significant cost associated with maintaining and sustaining any legacy system, without a proportional capability increase associated with that investment. As we continue to spend limited fiscal resources to sustain legacy systems developed for threats 20 years ago, we risk steadily losing our competitive advantage against potential adversaries. We need to modernize our ground tactical vehicle and aircraft fleets soonest. Accelerating the investments of amphibious ships is necessary to reach our wartime requirement. If forced to continue to pursue the path of investing in legacy systems in lieu of modernizing our force, we will find our Marine Corps optimized for the past and increasingly at risk to deter and defeat our potential adversaries. On behalf of all of our Marines, sailors, and their families, and the civilians that support their service, we thank the Congress and this subcommittee for the opportunity to discuss our key challenges the Marine Corps faces. I thank you for your support as articulated in the recent 2017 National Defense Authorization Act. While much work needs to be done, the authorizations within, coupled with sufficient funding and the repeal of the Budget Control Act, will begin to put us on a path to rebuild and to sustain our Marine Corps for the 21st century. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Lewis.
Thank you, Chairman Inhofe, Ranking Member King, distinguished members of the subcommittee. On behalf of the Secretary of the Air Force and Chief of Staff of the Air Force, it's a pleasure to be here with you today and with my fellow Vice Chiefs. I request a written record be submitted in the record. American airmen are professional, innovative, dedicated, and frankly, the envy of the world. They're proud to be part of the most powerful joint warfighting team in our history. We provide our leaders with a broad range of options for protecting our country and its interests, both home and abroad. For the past 70 years, responsive, flexible, and agile American air power has been our nation's first and often most sustainable solution in conflict and in crisis, underwriting every other instrument of power. We provide the nation with unrelenting global vigilance, global reach, and global power. In short, your Air Force is always in demand and always there. Look no further than 2 weeks ago when your Air Force executed a precision strike in Sirte, Libya, killing over 100 violent extremists. This was a textbook, trans-regional, multi-domain, and multi-function mission. Air Force space, cyber, and ISR warriors provided precision navigation timing while monitoring enemy communication and movement. Simultaneously, 2 B-2 bombers took off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, flew a 34-hour nonstop mission, refueled with 18 tankers from U.S., European, and Middle East bases, and teamed with 2 MQ-9s to employ 108 precision munitions, meeting their time on target within 10 seconds. Meanwhile, every day, your American airmen operate 60 remotely piloted aircraft patrols, 24/7, 365, as the unblinking eye for combatant commanders. They remotely fly these missions from the continental United States. They team with nearly 20,000 forward-deployed airmen to support the missions like the recent Raqqa and Mosul offensives, where our fighter, bomber, and RPA airmen also conduct 92% of U.S. strikes against ISIS. We do all of this while fulfilling 2 of our nation's most critical missions at home. We ensure 2/3 of the nuclear triad and 75% of nuclear command control communications remain to ensure robust, reliable, flexible, and survivable options for the nation. While our fighters and tankers remain on alert, as they have for the past 15+ years, ready to launch to defend the homeland. The capabilities our airmen provide to our nation and our allies have never been more vital, and our global demand for American air power will only grow in the future. However, this steadfast watch comes at a price, and the demand for our mission and our people exceeds the supply. We're out of balance. 26 years of continuous combat has limited our ability to prepare for future advanced threat scenarios with the lowest margin of error and the highest risk to national security. Nonstop combat paired with budget instability and lower than planned top lines have made the United States Air Force one of the smallest, oldest equipped, and least ready in our history. We've attempted to balance the risk across our force to maintain readiness, but have been forced to make unacceptable trade-offs between readiness, force structure, and modernization. Today's global challenges require an Air Force not only ready to defeat today's violent extremism, but prepared and modernized for any threat the nation may face. Mr. Chairman, I'll close by quoting General Douglas MacArthur. He sent a cable as he escaped the Philippines in 1942. He said, "The history of failure in war can be summed up in 2 words. Too late. Too late to comprehend the deadly purpose of the potential enemy. Too late in realizing the mortal danger. Too late in preparedness." Distinguished members of the subcommittee, preparedness or readiness cannot be overlooked. Your Air Force needs congressional support for FY17 to pass an appropriation and support for a budget amendment that accelerates readiness recovery. In FY18, we must repeal the Budget Control Act and provide predictable funding for the future. These are critical to rebuilding full spectrum military readiness, which is the #1 priority of the Secretary of Defense. We need to act now before it's too late. On behalf of the Secretary, the Chief of Staff, and the 660,000 Airmen, Active Guard, Reserve, and civilians who serve our nation, thank you for your tireless support. I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank all of you for your opening statements. I see this, as I did 22 years ago in this committee, that not just to get our state of readiness where it should be, but also to tell the truth about how unready we are. I think you did a good job of that, General Wilson, and Admiral Moran. The thing that was probably came out and shocked most people from yesterday was your statement about what more than half of the F-18s are not running. I mean, people need to hear that, and they need to hear it from you guys who are at the top and who are in a position to say it with more credibility, certainly, than I could say it. So anyway, we know where we are right now. We know the problems we have. The only area that there's Senator Kane and I are in very much agreement. In fact, we have a mutual friend that put us together several years ago, and we have a friendship. There's a little bit of difference in how we see what has happened during the last administration. The idea of finding ourselves where we have to do something about sequestration, we have to do something about the deterioration in the funding and the abilities and the capabilities of our military. But as we do that, we don't want to be in a position where for every dollar we do that, we have to do it for the non-defense. I mean, that philosophy tells me that the priority is not what I interpret the Constitution. And I told you all of this when you were in my offices. And so I think it's important that we recognize that we're going to have to do a lot of rebuilding here, and we have to tell the truth. You talk about we're pretty good forward, but we got nearly an empty bench behind him. That's a serious thing. So you've heard a lot of the talks recently. You've heard the figures, as some of you have referred to. The Army going to 540,000 ships, 355 Marines to 36 battalions, and 1,200 fighter aircraft over there for General Wilson. These are figures that it's going to be hard to actually come out for exact figures. But we talked to Mattis about these same figures, and they recognize they do represent an enhancement that has to be there. So I want to start off by asking each one of you how realistic you think these figures are, just not as if they're going to be exact, but are they in the ballpark of the threat that's facing us now? Start with you, General.
Thank you, Chairman Inhofe, and I'll start by...
I neglected to say, let's change this. If there's no objection, we'll use 7-minute rounds because we're going to have to do this in one round. Go ahead.
I'll ignore this 4-minute ticker on my
Just
my
ignore that.
screen here.
Back on 7.
But yes, Chairman Inhofe, the Secretary of Defense has directed a strategic review that we expect to result in a adjusted force sizing construct. But as Chief of Staff of the Army has highlighted in prior testimony, the estimate that 540,000 in the active force reflects is a subset of what would it take to get the military risk level to respond to the contingencies that we face and the operational plans of our combatant commands down to a moderate level.
So you talk about moderate risk.
A moderate risk level. That would require a 1.2 million total force. Now, if we get adjusted guidance, obviously, we will do our internal due diligence to determine exactly what the right number is. But you asked, is it in the ballpark? It's in the ballpark.
All right, and I appreciate that. You know, when you talk about risk, I would hope you would always make sure people understand. You risk, it talks about readiness, which talks about lives. We're talking about lives now, so that's how serious that is. Admiral Moran?
Yes, sir, Chairman. The number you quoted was based on our force structure assessment, which was done over the past year. I would tell you that that's a good target to start ramping towards. But as you know, in shipbuilding, it takes years to get to one ship. So we're going to have many years to assess where new technology takes us, new warfighting constructs. But as I said in my opening, we know we're too small for what we're being asked to do today. So we have to get on a ramp to not only arrest the decline, which I think we're on in PB-17, unsequestered and with an appropriations bill. So it's a target that's worth shooting for, at least in the beginning ramp of the next 4 to 5 years.
Okay, that's understandable. Would you repeat your characterization of our capability of our F-18s?
Yes,
So
sir.
that this record has them?
The facts are that for our entire Hornet fleet, that's the Hornets and Super Hornet fleet, we have 62% on a given day. Yesterday was 62%. I doubt it's changed much since yesterday. But we're in about 62% that are not flyable, which
More than
means-
half, yeah.
More than half. On a typical day, it's about 30%. If everything's going well, about 30% that's either in depot or on the flight line, it's not flyable. So we're double where we should be in non-flyable aircraft.
Thank you. General Walters?
Yes, sir. You use the figure 36 battalions for us. That's a reasonable target to shoot at if it's a total force number. But more importantly, I think, is if we grow end strength. I mentioned that we have done 18 months worth of analysis on what capabilities we need, and they're everywhere from ISR, IO, counter UAS, which is nascent but required, and I think late to need right now. Long range fires. So before we build another capacity, we need to fix the holes that are in our current organizations. That's a smaller number. 194,000 is about that. Before you start buying any additional capability, and that's a strategic choice that needs to be made, and the strategic review will look at that. But I think the 36 battalions comes from a two-thing strategy, doing two things simultaneously. I can tell you today we cannot do two things simultaneously. And one of the stressing ones for us is Korea, and we couldn't do that with at all if we still had commitments elsewhere in the world, Europe, Africa, or the Middle East.
You know, they don't use that anymore like they used to when they had two worldwide conflicts almost simultaneously.
Yes, sir, and I think our
Because
enemies
it's a
know that.
recognition we're not there.
Yes, sir, and I think our enemies know that, too.
Yeah, I think they do too. General Wilson?
Chairman, as I told you yesterday, we're at about 50% readiness today across the Air Force. We were the smallest Air Force we were ever in 2016, where we bottomed out at 310,000. This last year, we finished the year at 317,000. We want to grow our force to 321 this next year, but we think the target we're shooting for is 350,000 airmen for the United States Air Force. That number fills 100% of our current manning documents. So that's a current mission, that's no new mission. And so as mentioned by General Allyn, as a strategic defense review looks at where we need to be, that number can be adjusted even up. But we think 350,000 is the number for our airmen.
Good answers.
We think we need 60 fighter squadrons,
Okay.
in addition to modernizing our nuclear force and our space forces.
I want to get at one other area before we go around, and that is when you're going through a starvation period, you have two problems, and that one is it's at the expense of modernization and maintenance. First of all, do you agree with that? What I'd like to have is just from each one of you, the area of modernization that needs to be enhanced now because you've had to let that go, starting with you, General Allyn.
As we testified last year, Chairman Inhofe, we've had most of our modernization programs on life support for the last several years. We are currently, our modernization program is 50% of what it was in 2009. In 2009, it was $48.5 billion. It's $24.8 billion this year. And it's inadequate to modernize for the near term, let alone the long-range future force that we know we're going to require on a multi-domain battlefield. So we would prioritize against our near-peer competitors to ensure our current platforms are the best that we can possibly field, and then begin to work on the new equipment that we would need. The good news about modernizing current equipment is it's shovel-ready today if the resources are provided.
Yeah. Admiral?
Senator, as you know, modernization for us also comes in the form of maintenance. We modernize our ships while they're in maintenance on just upgrading radars, weapon systems, those sorts. But in terms of platform modernization, our top priority is the Columbia-class
Yes.
to replace the Ohio-class submarines. We're at the end of service life in Ohio if we don't start this year. So we appreciate the anomaly in the current CR environment for Columbia. Second would be a close call between building to the 12th nuclear aircraft carrier Ford class to get us to a total of 12. And then DDGs and SSNs, probably SSNs over DDGs if we had to prioritize them, simply because we're already very low on our SSN numbers that are going lower over time, and that's a key capability for us.
Okay, well, Generals Wilson and Walters, you answer it for the record, since we're out of time here. But keep one thing in mind, and that is when you're looking at the future, you don't know really what you have to. I always remember the last year I was on the House Armed Services Committee, we had a witness, this is 1994. They said that in 10 more years, we will no longer need ground troops. So you don't know, predicting in the future, it's very difficult to do. So if you want to meet the expectations of the American people, you have to be superior in all areas, which we're not. Senator Kane.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the witnesses. First, a general question for all four of you, based on your verbal testimony. Would you agree that a comprehensive national security strategy would require a repeal of sequestration, not only for defense, but also for the non-defense counts that directly bear upon national security?
Senator Kane, absolutely. We require a new national security strategy to guide both the military capability that's required and the other elements of national power that would be integrated to whatever solution we would need to deliver around the world.
I would agree with General Allyn, sir.
I agree, sir. The entire nation's power needs to be brought to bear.
Thanks, General.
I agree.
Thanks, General Wilson. General Allyn, in your verbal testimony, in talking about readiness, you talked about the link between readiness and our ability to recruit and retain our best talent. And I'd like you to elaborate on that a little bit. What's the connection between these readiness discussions we're having and the ability to recruit and retrain?
Thank you, Senator Kane. As I talked in the intro of the conversation, the Army is people. At its core, our primary weapon system is our soldier. And so unless we can continue to assess the great champions that continue to join the United States Army every day and retain the best, we cannot sustain the tempo that we are executing each and every day around the globe. We have really endured the last several years of a drawdown on the backs of our soldiers who have been willing to extend the time deployed, reduce the time at home, and carry that load. And we cannot continue to bear that burden into the future without severe readiness impacts. If we don't have soldiers manning our forces and carrying our weapons, we don't have anything. And so that is job one for us. Now, the good news is we are successfully recruiting the force that we need, and we are seeing very positive signs in retention. In response to the NDAA 17 authorization, our first step was to try to retain more of the current force. And within the first 30 days of this effort, 2,500 have said, I want to extend on this great team. So we are encouraged by that. But we know that this is a long-term effort, and we have to stay after it.
Thank you. Admiral Moran, you and I talked in my office about the maintenance of ships, and as you point out, maintenance is modernization for a lot of what you do. If we're down from the 300 and teens down to 275, doesn't that make the maintenance of the remaining 275 even more important?
Yes, sir, it absolutely does.
Talk to me a little bit about the shipyards, and I'll stay with Admiral Moran because there was an implementation guideline on the civilian workforce hiring freeze that was last week issued by the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Work, and he authorized certain exemptions for positions in shipyards and depots that perform direct management of inventory and direct maintenance of equipment. But nevertheless, that hiring freeze still is affecting your shipyard and depot workers, and many of them are nearing retirement. If this hiring freeze were to continue without adjustment, talk a little bit about the effect that that would have on shipyards in particular.
Yes, Senator, I'm mindful of the fact that we've got several members here that have shipyards that are very
I
concerned.
was trying to beat
Yes,
Senator
sir.
McKean to the question.
So we have some pretty good assurances that the hiring freeze that has been put, the temporary hiring freeze is put into place. We will be able to get exemptions for our depots and our yards. We are still working through the mechanics of that, though. Does the Secretary of the Navy, who's been delegated authority to allow for these exemptions, have to sign each person's exemption, or can we do these in groups based on a lower echelon input? So we're working through those details, but I think you'll be pleased to know that we're going to get through this in a very near term. But to your point, if it were to endure, we're back to sequestration, furlough levels of 13, what was devastating to our force. So we don't want to go there.
And could I have the other members of the panel talk a little bit about what the hiring freeze would mean if it continued?
Sir, I'll just give you a short example. We're doing a lot of planning to increase readiness and grow the force and do these things. I'm short contracting officers, 50%. If I can't hire contracting officers, we can put any plan we want in place, and we can put the money in place, but I can't execute it, it's not going to come to fruition. So that's one of our challenges.
Admiral Wilson.
You mentioned shipyards, depots are the same way. So we need to be able to, today, 96% of our civilian workforce works outside of Washington, D.C. They work in places like our depots or on our flight lines. And if we can't hire, then that has a direct impact to readiness. So we're confident that we got the procedures in place to move through this, but we can't have it slow down the hiring.
And for the Army, we've begun to triage our depots based on those temp and term hires that were about to expire. We've worked through February. We're just about through March. And we find that the waiver is meeting the need that we have for our commanders. And we have a direct link between our commanders and the Secretary to ensure that bureaucracy does not get in the way of taking care of our people.
I'm going to use the remainder to allow General Walter and General Wilson to ask the question that Senator Inhofe asked, because I was really interested in the prioritization. If there were restoration of funds, what are some of the highest priority items that you've not been able to do that you would want to do? And I think this is really important testimony to get on the record today. So to each.
Yes, sir. So we are like all the other services have taken risk in modernization. We're at about 50% of where we were even 5 years ago. It caused us to make decisions. Our ground combat vehicle program, our 40-year-old amphibious vehicles, our Humvees need to be replaced. And we have programs for that, but they're very minimal amount, minimum sustaining rate. And it caused us to do things like an obsolescence program on our light armor vehicles instead of buying a new one. So we're putting, I don't like the term Band-Aid, but we're putting an obsolescence program on a light armored vehicle when we really should be buying new iron.
General Wilson.
Senator Kane, just like Admiral Moran talked about, our first priority would be nuclear modernization. We've delayed investment in that for far too long. Today, we have 75 less F-35s than we had planned on in 2012. So the F-35 program is a significant modernization program going forward. Additionally, the KC-46 and the B-21 are significant programs going forward. And today's modernization is tomorrow's readiness. And right now, our average fleet is over 27 years old. We've got 21 of 39 fleets of our aircraft that exceed 27-year average. So building this new capability will help the modernization going forward.
Senator, if I could add, if you don't mind, General Wilson reminded me that for Navy, I was focused on the shipbuilding part, but aviation is clearly a priority. Either in the near term, buying Super Hornets to replace the Hornet fleet, the legacy Hornet fleet, but also we're in the same position. We're well behind where we wanted to be when it comes to the F-35. So those are two very important modernizations.
I know that's true, along with the pilot problem, which I'm hoping one of the members will get into. Thank you, Senator Kane. Lieutenant Colonel Ernst.
Thank Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here today. And I told a friend earlier today that I think what I'm going to hear from you gentlemen today is very similar to what we heard from last year. And that's extremely disappointing, I think, for all of us. So thank you for working under such tight constraints. General Wilson, I'll start with you. The Iowa Army Ammunition Plant produces components for some of America's most advanced ammunitions. Since 1941, it's played a role in ensuring America's forces are ready. And noted in your written statement that you say we must have sufficient munitions to counter threats. So you're stating, in your opinion, that your munition supply is low. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator. Today, we're expending about, well, in the ISIS fight, we've expended 43,000 munitions. We're spending about 1,500 a month. So replenishing that stock, we think, will take about $1 billion a year added investments over a significant period of time just to replenish those stocks. But our preferred munitions to meet all the combatant commanders' needs, we have a deficit across all of them that we need to dig our way out of.
So as far as Congress is concerned, simply by providing the dollars necessary, you would be able to secure those ammunitions. Is that?
Well, yes, ma'am, but we've put investments not only into the munitions, but into, as you described, the infrastructure that makes those munitions. So all the plants that produce the fill for the munitions are part of the investment going forward. But it's a significant investment, that we believe, of about $1 billion a year for about a decade, just on munitions.
Very good. I appreciate that. Thank you very much, General. And General Allyn, thank you. I appreciate your leading the way in everything that you do and your travels around the globe to visit our soldiers. That has been very important, and it has been noted in many conversations that I've had. So thank you so much. You stated that our greatest asset is our soldiers, and I firmly believe that. I believe that we have some of the finest young men and women out there. And as you know, I've been a longtime proponent of upgrading small arms capabilities within the Army, and I know that readiness begins with the individual soldier. So if they are not ready, none of our higher echelons can be ready. And I do commend the Army's recent action on upgrading its handgun. I did receive a call from the chief, and glad to hear about that. Fact remains that it took far too long for that to happen, but we are on our way. Russia continues to upgrade its rifles, and this really needs to be a priority as well for the Army. And so, again, to you, besides more money, what can we do to upgrade other small arms, and how can we do it faster?
Well, I know that you're aware we have a soldier enhancement program that is part of our program executive office's soldier, and we are focused on a number of initiatives to ensure that our soldiers have the best possible equipment as they go into combat in the future, as we have been able to do in the past. We have many of those programs, just like every other modernization program that we have. For instance, our multi-year programs for our aviation fleet are all on the floor, right? They're absolutely at the minimum level to keep those contracts alive. We cannot operate that way. The unit cost for every aircraft is increased each time we do that, and yet year over year, we're put into this dilemma. So in our soldier portfolio, I can provide for the record specifics, but having reviewed that in detail and visited PEO Soldier at Fort Belvoir, we have a number of lighter, better human dynamic and next generation FLIR capability that we need to get to the force. But we've got to have money to enable that to happen. And so I appreciate your continued support as we move forward.
Outstanding. Thank you, General. And Admiral Moran, thank you. I enjoyed our conversation the other day, and we agreed that readiness is really a mutual obligation, something that we have to commit to in the Congress. And you committed to continue to look for ways to make major acquisitions like the Ford-class carrier and the F-35C more efficient. That's imperative. And I recognize Congress's responsibility to provide better budget planning and execution. Can you commit to me here again that you're going to hold programs like the Ford-class carrier accountable?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
And thank you. And in our meeting, you painted a very grim picture of our Navy's current state of readiness. And I think ensuring that we are being fiscally conservative with major programs like that is key to establishing that readiness. And question for you, and something that we just briefly touched on, if our Navy had to answer to 2 or more of the so-called 4+1 threats today, could we do that?
I hate to use the lawyer answer here and say it depends, because it does depend on which 2 of the 4 we're talking about. And to answer it more specifically than that, I think we probably need to go into a closed hearing to really fully flesh that out for you. But we are at a point right now, as I said in my opening and in my written statement, that our ability to surge beyond our current force that's forward is very limited, which should give you a pretty good indication that would be challenging to meet the current guidance to defeat and deny in 2 conflicts.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Admiral. And finally, just very briefly, General Walters, you listed the growing concern for the end strength as one of your top priorities. And right now, it looks like you're going to have to pull in 3,000 Marines a year to meet those recruiting goals. Is that accurate?
To be quite accurate, Senator, we think we should not grow any faster to ensure our standards are met.
Very good. And given that...
And we'll buy their pistol.
Very good. The legal answer. Given that women make up about 50% of our population, actually a little bit more, that's a good place to start. Do you have a plan for utilizing women, and what role will they play as you try and increase your readiness and reach your desired end strength?
And as you well know, the policy now is that all MOSs are open to women in the Marine Corps. We have a battalion that's starting to integrate women right now. I can't report to you on any results of that. We have 3 female infantry down there and 3 in the staff. And that was out of 380 that were trained and 3 volunteered. We've turned the recruiters to start recruiting for that MOS, and we have 13 in the pipeline right now. So it's going to be a law of small numbers for a while, I believe.
Great. Well, I appreciate it very much, General. And P.S., the Marines need more amphibs. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today and for your service to the country. Now, I just want to pick up on Senator Ernst's comments about handguns for the Army and point out that I was very pleased to see that get done and very proud to report that those handguns are going to be made in New Hampshire by Sig Sauer, which is an excellent company, so you're going to get the best. Admiral Moran, as we discussed when we met, one of the things that I found very concerning was when the first meeting of the Navy caucus met last fall, that Admiral Richardson said to us that the Navy no longer plans any spending in the first quarter of the new fiscal year because of the ongoing continuous resolutions that you all have had to deal with and the uncertainty that that means. So I think we are probably looking at another CR for the remainder of this year. And I wonder if each of you could identify what you think will be the most challenging impact of that CR as you look at what you're facing in this current budget situation.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. I'll start, and I know they'll be ready to pile on here, but our FY17 NDAA authorized an increase in our operations maintenance account of over $4 billion. None of that will be executable under a continuing resolution. That will have severe implications to not only planned operations here in the homeland, but OCO missions as well, contingency operations overseas. And so that will be a significant problem. We also have 50 new starts that are part of our President's budget for 17. None of those will get started. And to the point that Senator Ernst made about ammunition, we also have a severe backlog in our war reserves, which we were trying to get after by increasing production at our plants and facilitating those plants. None of that will be possible under a year-long continuing resolution. That's just the top couple for the United States Army.
Thank you.
Senator, thanks for the question. The top for us would be deferral of 14 ship avails to include 1 submarine that would add to the current bow wave or backlog that we have, which is rather enormous. And we will begin to shut down 2 air wings completely. And that means no flying for 2 air wings, and we'd go to what we refer to as tactical hard deck for 2 additional air wings, which is 11 hours a month per pilot, just to keep them safe. And then we would, would definitely impact the other flight hour accounts which do pilot production, so where we train pilots to become pilots. So I'm about to go over to the Naval Academy tonight to welcome the newest selectees for naval aviation. I'd hate to tell them that they're not going to be able to train to be pilots for a while. But that's what we're being faced with if we go to a year-long CR, without trading OMAN accounts around where something else has to give.
Thank you. General Walters.
Yes, Senator, I'm with the Navy on this one. The definition of a CR is spending at 16 levels. Our flying hour accounts are nowhere near. I think I testified yesterday that if we don't get a supplemental, we'll probably stop flying in July. It could be more. We could burn through our 16 levels because we have more RBA aircraft in 17 than we had in 16, and that's how it works. And that would be an effect on us.
Thank you.
Senator, we would have a $1.5 billion math problem to make up. It would impact 60 new starts. Those to meet that math problem, we'd have to directly, the only place we can go for money is our readiness accounts. So it'd be flying hours, WSS, or facilities FSRM accounts. So much like the rest of the service, we'd stop flying in the summer, we'd backlog the depots, we'd have to further delay any modernization of our infrastructure on our bases. So the thing we're trying to stop or to dig our way out of readiness would impact the most.
Thank
And
you all.
if I could, Senator, just to add for all of us, you authorized an end strength increase. That would not be funded. And so we would be starting that hollow force revisit that at least when I joined the United States Army, we were coming out of that. And we would be starting back down that precipice.
Well, I know that I think I've heard everyone on this subcommittee and everyone on the Armed Services Committee say that we can't let that happen. And so shame on us if we don't take action to address it. I want to, General Wilson, I was distressed to read in your testimony that pilot retention has declined for 5 straight years. And is that, to what do you attribute? Is it the uncertainty that people are facing, the lack of readiness to be able to train, or is there something else going on?
Senator, there's a lot of factors at play here, but let me try and give you a snapshot of a couple of them. It is lack of flying because pilots join the Air Force to fly. I'll use in different categories, but today's fighter pilots are flying about 75 to 80 sorties a year, and they're flying about 140 to 150 hours a year total. That's significantly down from before. So they come in the Air Force to fly. We've got lots of efforts underway to improve the culture of the squadron, to see what a 21st century squadron looks like, and how do we remove the impediments, the administrative that keeps pilots from doing what they want to do. So whether it be reducing additional duties or their ancillary training, improving their quality of life, we're working on those efforts. But the other part of it is there's an ops tempo that goes on. Again, if I take a fighter squadron, for example, the Shaw fighter squadrons that fly F-16s, when they're in the bucket to deploy, that year they average 260 days a year gone from their families. On the year that they're back home, not deployed, they're averaging 110 days TDY to do other things, red flags, other exercises, so they're gone a lot. So at about that 11-year point, the family makes a decision, do I continue doing this, and the airlines are hiring, and they're paying a lot of money, and is this a better stability for us? And so we're trying to get after this problem, and I can talk more on the pilot shortage, because I don't think it's an Air Force problem or a Navy problem or a Marine problem. It's a national problem that we're going to have to get our arms around to get after.
Thank you. One of the issues that we've been following very closely in New Hampshire is what's happening with the KC-46 new air refueling tankers. And I was just learned that the delivery, that first delivery of aircraft has slid by about 6 months. Will that have an impact on our readiness? How will that affect what's happening?
Senator, we don't think it'll impact readiness per se, because we're going to keep the number of KC-135s and KC-10s, and as we bring on the KC-46, once we get to the 479 tankers, then we'll start one-for-one replacing KC-10s with, and taking them out of the fleet. So it's not ideal. We would want it to be on time, but we've slid it a little bit. We'll go to, after the initial batch of 3 per month, then we're going to go to 1.5, 1.25, but that slide and adjustment has made about a 6-month delay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Chairman McCain.
I thank the witnesses, and I only wish that all members of Congress could hear the testimony today as we again fight the battle of sequestration. And I only have one question, and I don't want to take the time of my colleagues, but in the late 1970s, some of you may recall or know that the Chief of Staff of the United States Army came before Congress and said that we had a hollow army, and that caused significant repercussions throughout the Congress and the nation. I'll begin with you, General Allyn. Do we face the prospect of a hollow army?
Thank you, Chairman McCain. And my belief is if we continue with a continuing resolution, and if we do not eliminate sequestration this year, then we will be faced with the likelihood of beginning that dive toward a hollow force.
Senator, I believe that the sign of a hollow force is when no one wants to stay in the force. And I think the longer we go, to General Allen's point, with reduced funding and our inability to allow our young men and women to do what they joined to serve their country, they'll walk, and that will lead to a hollow force. So we're under threat here in the next few years if we don't get our fiscal house in order.
And Chairman, same for us. If we don't give them the new equipment, they won't stay around. And that by definition, at least in my mind, is a hollow force.
Chairman, I would agree with everything that's been said. As we look at the time period you talked about, the late 70s, at the depth of the hollow force, we're flying less sorties and less hours today than we were then. Now, the good news is we saw how we got there, and we saw how we get out of that. So we know what's required to do that. We know that it takes, first of all, manpower. Once we fix the manpower, then we get the right training. With the right training, we get the weapon system support, we get the flying hours that we need, we fix the infrastructure, and we can dig out of this. But we have to start now.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for your service to our country. Sometimes we don't say that enough. We appreciate what you do. I want to just work through some anecdotes that we've learned about, and I'd like your thoughts on them, and perhaps this brings some focus to the day-to-day operations and some of the challenges that you have and your team has. If you don't feel comfortable discussing it in this category, please let me know. Admiral Moran, I'd like to start with you. Can you talk about the submarines that you've got right now, their capacity or their capabilities right now, and whether or not specifically with the USS Boise, what the challenges are and the current position?
Senator, thanks for the question. First of all, our submarine force is the finest in the world, unquestioned. But we're lacking capacity in the long haul. So if we don't turn around our procurement of Virginia-class submarines, we're going to be down in the low 40s by the middle of next decade. That's the lowest point I can recall. And we ask an awful lot of that force. To give you an indication of where we are with this smaller Navy running harder than it has in a very long time, we are out at our public yards. The priorities to fix ships in the public yards are our nukes, starting with our boomers because of the national strategic deterrence, followed by our aircraft carriers, and then we get down to the SSN world. And because of the capacity limitations and the workforce limitations that we've had and our inability to get some of our submarines or some of our work assigned to the private yards, we've had to delay submarines like Boise for extended period of time. So Boise was scheduled for a 24-month availability. They are now on month 47. In that time, the CO has come. Yes,
May I
sir.
just
Go ahead.
make the point? What you're telling me is that you got a nuclear submarine that because it doesn't meet readiness standards, you can't take it out and utilize it. Today.
Even while it's waiting for maintenance, it is not certified to dive because of the length of time it's been parked. Yes, sir, that's true. And the last piece of that that's important is that much like Albany, another SSN, which also was extended for 48 months, that CO started the eval and finished the eval having never left the yards to operate that submarine. The XO and the chief engineer, I believe, neither one of them promoted, and the entire crew never deployed. And we're on path to do that with Boise if we don't get her going. So we're looking hard at the private yards to fix that problem. We have upwards of 5 additional submarines this year who are going to have to go for an extension to their dive certification that are in a similar situation. We think we'll get most of those extensions by NR, but if they don't, then we have a similar problem with some of them as we have with Boise today.
It's one thing to be able to buy new. It's another thing to take care of the stuff you've got. What you're suggesting is while we're talking about buying new, we're not giving you the resources to even take care of the equipment that we've got today necessary for your operations.
We often trade readiness dollars, the OMAN dollars, to pay for current operations and making sure our kids that are overseas on deployment have everything they need.
I understand right now it's not just the ships themselves, it's not just the boats themselves. When you talk about manning them and equipping them, is it true that right now there have been cases in which you've had carriers moving back out of the areas of forward operations into the back areas and trading them off and literally having to stop midway and trading munitions from one ship to another because you don't have the resources right now to maintain two?
All of the services are struggling with munition stocks, and we're no different. So when our carriers swap places, one coming home and one going on deployment, they often have to offload some of their munitions to fill the stocks of the one that's going on deployment. That is true.
Not necessarily the best way to run an operation.
Not if you're going to turn that carrier back around if something happens in the world like has happened in the last 5 years.
Yes,
That's true. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Let me just ask with regards to the tankers right now that we've got. I don't think we can go any place in the world right now without having any one of our aircraft having the availability of a tanker. What's your current status on tankers and what are their capabilities today and what would you expect them to be in order to meet the ongoing needs of the Air Force?
Senator, we're flying KC-135s today. We're bringing on the KC-46, which is brand new. We'll start delivery this year. Flying KC-10s to keep 479 booms in the air, and you're absolutely correct. We become a global Air Force because of our tanker force that can move us around the world. And as I highlighted in the opening testimony, the strike in Libya would have never happened without 18 different tankers taken off from bases in the U.S., Europe, and the Middle East to make that mission happen. Our tankers are getting old, and that's why the KC-46 is so important going forward and why it improves everything. It improves MC rates to have more of them to fly, aircraft availability. It improves capacity. So the KC-46 modernization program is the first step to modernize a tanker force largely that was built in the 50s, modernized along the way, but we're flying tankers, KC-135s with tail numbers of 5, 6, older than I am, and I'm an old guy out there on the ramp. And as we've talked about, the maintainers who maintain those do Herculean efforts to keep all those airplanes ready.
Let me ask you about your pilots right now. How long does it take you right now to train a pilot, and how long under optimum conditions should it take you based upon the availability of aircraft that are airworthy today?
Senator, today, to produce a basic pilot takes a little over a year. From that time, then they'll go on to their training school. Depending on what they're doing, it takes anywhere from 4 to 8 months to a year to get what we call mission ready. And then after that, then they'll go off to their units. Our training pipeline is pretty much at capacity. So we're producing about 1,200 pilots a year. We think we can grow that to about 1,400 and then we'll max out the current capacity to produce pilots. Our problem isn't getting pilots in the front end, it's basically on the retaining them on the back end, and then in the middle of that, being able, what we call absorb them, to get them all the flight time and training that they need. The hours and sorties have been coming down across the force in the last decade.
I had a chance to visit the F-35 base, the training base in South Carolina yesterday. I noted that you've got up-to-date models that are flying right now. They've got good operational capabilities, Admiral, and that basically that B model right now is operational and ready to go. The one thing that I discovered on it is that you guys could use more of those in an expedited manner to make up the difference. That aircraft, where for a while there were program problems, right now you're using some updated software in it, they're flying, and they've got a good operational capability. The aircraft in its current condition, we can use those in combat today, can't we?
Yes, sir, we can.
I'm
The
sorry,
software
excuse me.
upgrades, the software upgrades need to continue to give us full capability. It needs to deliver on time.
I was very impressed with what you're doing down there, and appreciate it, and
Thanks
Thank you
thanks
for the
for
opportunity, Ron.
visiting the Marines down there,
thank
sir.
you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Hirono?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your service and leadership. Admiral Moran, thank you very much for your commitment to making sure that we move ahead with the waiver of the hiring freeze at our shipyards. Pearl Harbor Navy Shipyard is very important to our national security as well as to Hawaii. General Wilson, in your prepared testimony, you state that today's Air Force is at risk of becoming a second best hand with readiness hovering near 50%. Can you explain for the American public what this means in terms of what the Air Force can and can't accomplish in terms of its mission? And in your opinion, how much additional budget, relative recent budgets, would the Air Force need, and how much time would it take to get readiness levels to much more acceptable levels?
Let me start with, I used an example, Senator, how long does it take to grow a 8-year tech sergeant? It takes 8 years. And that's the type of experience we need that I think it's going to take to get to the readiness levels that we need. It's not going to happen in 1 year or 2 years, so we're looking at 6 to 8 years to bring the readiness level back up to 80%. When I talk about the United States Air Force being 50% ready, there's pockets of the Air Force that are significantly below that. Let me give you a snapshot again. If I were to go back to Desert Storm timeframe in 1991, our Air Force stood at about 500,000 active airmen, 134 fighter squadrons. Today, we have 55 fighter squadrons, and that's active Guard and Reserve. Of that, 71% are deployed today or in doing COCOM assigned missions, Homeland Defense of the nation, or doing theater support in both Europe and the Pacific. Or said another way, there's 29% left in the United States not fully engaged today. And in those different units, in a case against the violent extremists, I've got very ready crews. They're going to win in the Middle East. But against a high-end adversary, they're not training the way they should. They're not doing all the muscle movement, all the skills that they need to practice on a routine basis to be ready against any adversary anywhere.
When you talk about a high-end adversary, you're talking about
A Russia or China,
China.
for example.
Okay. Again, General Wilson, the Air Force COS has stated that 50,000 airmen have left the Air Force while missions have grown, so there's a math problem, and that the Air Force is too big for the resources available, but far too small for what the nation demands of it. Can you explain the implications of reduced readiness and the impacts on morale and retention? Because I think one of you said that, it's getting them in the front end, that's okay, but keeping them is a major problem. Can you talk about the Air Force's plan to increase readiness in future years? And also, what steps are being taken by the Air Force to meet the requirements for more technically capable recruits for areas like space, cyber, ISR, and nuclear?
Senator, those are all fantastic questions. Let me maybe start with the last one. So we are in competition, right? We want the best talent America has to offer, and the good news is we're getting great talent. It's going to continue to be a challenge as we go forward, as we grow a force, because we got to be able to attract America's best and brightest. They've got to see what we do is different, and I think we can connect to the American public about the value of our mission. When they see what we're doing, they want to serve. They want to join our team. But to be part of that, be part of a world-class team, we need to give them the right education, training, and equipment, and then make sure they're both personally and professionally fulfilled. That's what keeps them in the service. And so across those areas, we've got lots of work to do to make sure that they're not coming into the Air Force and working on old, outdated equipment, that they're working on state-of-the-art equipment. The training and education they get is world-class. And again, so that they remain committed, passionate, and proud about serving our nation and personally and professionally fulfilled.
So for our other services, are you basically having retention problems also? And what are you doing to make sure that the troops stay in, our people stay in?
Retention should never be taken for granted, Senator. It's something we look at every day. When it comes to pilots, I think probably the Air Force is the bellwether for that, and we're watching very closely what they're doing, and we're looking for the partnerships to try to keep more pilots in place. The biggest thing we can do to retain servicemen and women is to give them the equipment they need and the training they need and the quality of service. The quality of life will come, but give them the things they need to do the job they came in for. If they sign up, let's get them the stuff they need.
Senator, I agree with everything that's been said. I would just add that retention problems are always looking in the rearview mirror. Very difficult to project when it's going to come without some of the canaries in the coal mine. On the pilot side, we certainly look to the Air Force to be the leading indicator of that. So we're concerned, deeply concerned, that they're having issues. When it comes to recruiting, I often look to the Army because they recruit more young men and women into the Army than any of us do. So if they're having troubles, then we should be looking next. So those are the bellwethers and the canaries in the coal mine for us. We currently are doing fine when it comes to recruiting. A lot of young men and women want to come join the service of their country. It's keeping them for the long haul, especially those that we invested a lot of money in for their technical training that we really have to pay attention to.
Senator, can I pile on just for a second, just give you another example? If each of us were to lose, let's again, I'll use fighter pilots just for example. If I say I lost 10 fighter pilots, what I really said, what I should be saying, that's a $100 million capital investment because they're about $10 million each to train, and it takes 11 years. Right, so when they get out at the 11-year point, that's the loss. I've got to make up that capital investment plus time and that experience. So we're focused hard on how to retain quality pilots in the Air Force and to what they've all said, to let them do their job with the right equipment.
Did you want to add something, General?
Well, thank you, Senator Hirono. I would echo the comments that have been made. I will tell you that we are assessing the finest talent that we have seen in our history. So we're getting high-quality soldiers that are joining. We are watching very carefully our mid-grade non-commissioned officers and mid-grade captains and majors who have been on this relentless tempo. The reason why the end strength increase is so important is that a smaller force cannot continue to carry the same load without a retention impact. And so we need to grow the force. We need to sustain the quality that we have, and we will not have a retention problem as we move forward if we do that.
And it's pretty hard to enable our people to do the jobs that they signed up for if we continue to rely on short-term CRs and we do not get rid of sequester, because those all impact readiness, modernization, all of those connected areas. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hirono. Senator Perdue.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for having this hearing, and I just want to say for the record, I'm shocked. When I read the testimony, and I want to thank you guys and your teams for everything you're doing, but I want to comment on where we are. I mean, this is shocking to me that the federal government has only a few things it's supposed to do. One of 6 reasons 13 colonies got together to start with was to defend and provide for the national defense. No leader would ever let that responsibility dwindle to this sort of capability. It's not the fault of these guys. God bless them. I think they're getting as much out of what we've given them over the last 25 years than anybody in the world. But here's where we are. This is not the first time we've been there. General Wilson, you mentioned the late 70s. I mean, in the 70s, post-Vietnam, we defunded the military. We recapped it in the 80s. We defunded again in the 90s. And we sort of recapped in the 2000, but behind 15 years at war, we burned it up. And a lot of that money went to operations, not equipment. And so we hear across all these services, we've got 20 years of catch-up here. And I don't know how you do that. When General Mattis last week, or 2 weeks ago, actually said, our secretary now said that the greatest threat to national security is our own federal debt. And here's why. I mean, we can't fund what these guys need and what we need for them to have. There's a moment in history here today, I just want to say it though, that I've heard both sides today say that we have something in agreement, and I want to document that today in the United States Senate. We both know that sequestration, CRs, and the BC caps are just devastating what we're trying to do here. But it's much bigger than that, Mr. Chairman, and leaders. I want to tell you how much I appreciate your brave face today. But I'm very concerned that in the last 8 years, and in the next 10 years, based on the baseline budget today, the federal government is borrowing over 35% of what it spends as a federal government. That means that we're borrowing the other 35%, the 35%. The problem with that is that our discretionary spending is about 30% of our total spend. So that means all of the tax money we get in pays for our mandatory. That means that every dollar we spend on your services, on the defense of the country, every dollar we spend on our veterans and our VA, every dollar we spend on the domestic programs which have been holding our military spending hostage is borrowed. We have to go to China to help fund what you're talking about doing today. Mr. Chairman, I don't know how to say this any clearer. We are in the throes of, I think, the worst military crisis we've had in our history, short only to the 1800s when we had to fund our first 5 frigates, and we didn't have any income to do it. I don't care how we do this, but we've got to get serious as a Congress and as an administration to figure out how to do this. I just have a couple of questions. I've read your testimony. It speaks for itself. But General Allyn, I'd like for you to emphasize for the record some really telltale. We had a question on Hall Force. I'd like to quantify that a little bit. You mentioned in here that your forces, you have about 31 BCTs. Is that right?
In the active force, 58 in the total force.
Yes, sir. So of that 58, is it of the 31, you have about 3 that could go to war tonight, that could fight tonight. Is that what you said?
That's correct. They're fully manned, fully equipped, and trained for immediate deployment.
And that 3 compares to the 58, is that correct?
That's across the 58.
Just to
But
put it
they
in
happen to be from the active force.
Agreed.
But however you do the math, it's,
That's what I'm trying
it's
to
not
look
good
at
enough.
how severe this really is relative to putting in perspective. It's amazing to me how Congress and past administrations have allowed this to happen. But talk about consuming readiness. As we sort of build that back, there's a danger, and I've heard this before, and I've seen it in business. You can consume what you're adding back. So by the time you get to the end of that adding back, you really haven't added much. And I know you each have that. Could you explain that to us more?
Well, and I think to my distinguished colleague from the Navy, he used the term supply and demand. It's really a very simple math problem. If your commitments remain steady or increase, as the United States Armies have during this drawdown, and your force is smaller, you are doing as much or more with less. And as a result, something gives. And for us, we would never send a soldier or a force to do a mission that wasn't trained and ready and fully equipped with the best that we can provide. What that means is the force that's back here is less ready than it needs to be, less well equipped. And for the United States Army, we've had to implement manning restrictions so that the forces going forward are fully manned.
And we see that. I've been on foreign relations now for just 2 years, but traveling around, meeting with your troops around the world. And by the way, the best of America, and I mean the very best, is in uniform. It makes me proud to be sitting here. And we want to fight to help do what you're trying to do. They're getting what they need at the tip of the spear. It's everything, the mojo back here that is what you're saying is our problem. But General Walters, just to be specific about one example of what I think General Allyn was talking about, in Moran, Spain, you've got a great contingent of Marines over there. Their mission, as I understand it, is to protect on a frontline basis the embassies in Africa. Is one of their missions, primary mission.
Yes, sir.
And we just had to bring half of our V-22 squadron back. Could you explain to us why we brought that back and
Because we couldn't sustain it, sir.
Yes, sir.
We had to reduce the commitment to Moran,
And
and,
what does that do to your mission capability?
well, it puts them on a little bit riskier position if they, you had 12 over there because we had to send 4 to South Sudan. A no-fail mission, 4 had to take off. Doing that with 6 aircraft, getting 4 out of 6 on a 24/7 basis is a little bit more risky.
Yes,
Now,
sir.
if we had the squadron, if we had the airplanes, we had the readiness, then we would keep 12 over there. It's the same with our, we didn't only reduce that one. Our CENTCOM commitment in Al Jaber went from 12 to 6 aircraft.
So basically cut that
We
capability.
cut those commitments. The commitment, the requirement was still there.
Yeah.
We just couldn't sustain it. So we had to reduce the commitment to a sustainable level, and that happened to be 6.
General Wilson, you mentioned that your average pilot today, active duty, averages about 150 hours a year. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
I'm shocked.
Across the fighter fleet.
Yes, sir. It would shock you, I know, but it certainly shocks me to realize, Mr. Chairman, that I'm flying 4 times. As sitting United States Senator, I put 4 times the number of airplane hours as our average Air Force pilot. That's shocking to me, and it's not your fault, but I recognize how severe that puts us. If we're looking at your priorities, no way that we can fund all this in the very short term. Can you prioritize between your list of the B-21, KC-46, F-35s, and talk about that just a little bit in terms of, in the nuclear capability?
Yes,
You said nuclear was priority 1, right?
We have to modernize our nuclear force. When you look at the nuclear force today, our Minuteman IIIs were built in the 60s. Minuteman I's in the 60s, modernized the Minuteman IIIs in the early 70s. We still have components on our Minuteman III for Minuteman I's. So we have to modernize those. Our outcome cruise missiles, again, designed in the 70s, built in the 80s to last 10 years. We're on their 5th service life extension for those missiles. So they have to be modernized. We have to have a missile that can get to the target and do what's asked to it. And we have a plan to do that with what's called the LRSO. The B-21 bomber, again, we're flying all of our bombers. Our newest bomber is 25 years old, the B-2. That's the newest bomber. So all of our bombers rolled. The B-21 will be a huge improvement to our combat capability. So nuclear first, KC-46 to follow, excuse me, F-35, KC-46, and then the B-21. So those are the programs going forward, modernization programs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, Senator Perdue. I think also we need to recognize, and this surprises a lot of people, I want to get some of these and distribute them out. This shows what has happened to our military in terms of priorities. In 1964, 52% of all revenues that came into the United States went into defending America. That figure is now 15%, which is a much higher, more volatile world out there. And so it's the only place to come up with the resources is going to have to be to reprioritize where military is. And I was a little bit critical of President Obama's position that he didn't want to do anything with the military unless you do an equal amount, because that's not what the Constitution tells us we're supposed to be doing. And I have 3 things to put in without objection into the record. Senator Kane?
Mr. Chair, if I could make just a response to your comment about the doing it equally for defense and non-defense, because I think, just to explain how we look at it from our side of the aisle, because maybe this will help us figure a way forward. There was no necessary linkage between spending on defense and non-defense prior to the sequestration of the budget caps. You'd make your argument for non-defense, you'd make your argument defense, hopefully convince your colleagues. When the caps were voted in place, the sequester in August of 2011, it was, let's try to find a good budget deal, but if we don't, we will impose budget caps equally on defense and non-defense. So the equality was as a result of the budget caps going into place in the sequester. And so we've always insisted on our side of the aisle that as long as the caps are in place, there should be equal relief. If sequester was repealed like that, we would be back in the previous state where there wouldn't be a 50-50 argument. Each side would make its case on the priorities that it wanted and may or may not succeed. But we insist on the 50-50, and I know the President did as well, because we are in a BCA cap environment. And as long as the sequester is the law, and we're not repealing the whole thing, we insist on 50-50. Now that the GOP controls both houses, it would seem like a good time to go ahead and get rid of the caps, and then we'll just go back to making our case about the priorities. But living under the caps under this scenario, I think we all agree, it really doesn't make any sense. And there's no 50-50 argument once the sequester goes away.
All right. Thank you, Senator Kane. Yes, Senator Shaheen.
I know that we have a time deadline, but I just thought it might be remiss of us to close this hearing without asking our panel to testify on the comments yesterday before the House panel on the BRAC process and whether they support that. Because there was testimony yesterday that some of you would like to see another round of base closing, and I just wanted to see if we could get a
Well, let's do this,
insights on
and I would, for the same opportunity for the other senators here, quite frankly, I didn't bring that up, and I didn't bring it up because I disagree with these guys. So, and here's the problem, and tell me if you disagree with this. I've been through every BRAC round, 5 of them now. Without exception, every BRAC round for the first 3 years costs money. If there's ever a time in our history of our military that we can't afford to dilute those dollars that we need to try to resolve the problems that have been talked about today, it's now. And the second reason is this. We've allowed in this starvation period, our function to go down. I've always been hesitant, and I felt the same way back in the 90s when we, after they said the Cold War is over, we no longer need this side, and we lived through that. But the problem with that is if you allow the mission, the infrastructure to go down, and the resources to go down to match what's already artificially low, then once you rebuild, you don't know for sure what you're going to need. Now, you didn't ask me, you asked them. So if you'd like to make any comments about your position on a very significant issue, it would be BRAC.
I'll step into the breach first, Chairman, recognizing that I'm going to say something that you disagree with. But I respect your opinion. I also recognize that I've been up here now, this is for the 3rd year, pleading for additional funding, pleading for the elimination of sequestration, and pleading for the stoppage of continuing resolutions. Given that those have not gone away, we are forced to look internally on where else can we save. And a BRAC is an area we know we can save. And yes, we do have to put money up front, but right now we are saving $1 billion per year from the 2005 BRAC and $2 billion per year from all the BRACs in prior years. That's real money that we need if we don't get rid of sequestration and we don't get rid of continuing resolution. So that's the environment that we're operating in, and to us, $1 billion would make a huge difference. It costs us $30 million to run an installation, whether there's a soldier on it or not. So this is real money when you have 154 installations to run around the world.
And I would say that if we can afford to reach that point where that yield is achieved and realized, I would agree with you. Any other comments on the BRAC?
Senator, I would just tell you, I learned a long time ago that waterfront property is something you should never give away.
The Army doesn't have much of that.
I know. And that's why I respectfully disagree with you. But so we feel we're in pretty good shape in the Navy. The 6% or so overhead that we're carrying really is internal to the bases. If we could do a micro BRAC inside our own bases just to demolish buildings we'd like to demolish and not have to go through the bureaucracy of that, that would be far more helpful than going through another round of BRAC to the Navy.
I appreciate it. Any other comments?
So we're small, either coast. We're fine right where we are.
Yeah, you still using retreads too.
Infrastructure.
Senator Perdue.
I apologize, but I cannot resist this moment. I think I came into the Senate as a dead hawk and also a defense hawk. We've lost the luxury of choosing sides on this. We have to be both. I'm very concerned that in the last 42 years since the 74 Budget Act, we talk about CRs and we talk about sequestration, all this, but we've used 175 CRs since 1974. That's not going to stop. The budget process is broken. It's one of the problems that creates this. It's not a partisan comment. It's one of the few things Senator Kane and I we've agreed that this is something we could get to a politically neutral platform. You could eliminate CRs. You could eliminate budget debt ceiling conversation. This is something that we can do. But I think we have to use the military as the platform, the reason why this is absolutely necessary we do it right now. So I would implore this subcommittee to start looking at that as a way to put pressure back on the people who do have an opportunity to change that process. 175 continuing resolutions under all kinds of precedents over the last 42 years. This has nothing to do with partisan politics. It's something that we've got to fix. We will never solve this problem until we solve that problem.
We might start by passing appropriation bills. Or,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I just want to be clear for the record that I agree with your position,
Oh,
not with General Allen, as much as I understand it.
And one last,
thank you.
I wasn't coming after Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, ma'am. My stepfather worked there for 30 years, okay? I got to go
Okay.
to school because of it.
and in 42 years, we've averaged 2.5 appropriation bills passed per year.
Yeah.
2.5.
It's
That's the problem.
disgraceful. General Wilson, last shot.
Senator, I think we carry about 25% extra capacity in our bases. I think there's an opportunity to do some smart investment going forward on how we do that, but right now, we're carrying a backlog of stuff that we have to pay for in this budget environment. I think we need to look at opportunity to save.
Okay, appreciate very much the excellent testimony and the attendance. Thank you so much for being here. We're adjourned.
Thanks.
Oh, you bet.